guys have ever gone to church on a Sunday morning to soak in the Holy Spirit, to receive the Spirit? Raise your hand. I mean, only Matt Callio. Great. Perfect. That's actually the topic of my research, is the relationship between the attitude that we have taken on through the influence of culture and how that pertains to our worship practices in the Western Church. So in order to understand what that relationship kind of looks like, we have to first analyze what the culture is. The world has entered into an era of advanced globalization that's known as postmodernity. The increased connectedness of the world through technological advances, like the internet and cell phones, has created a generation that is fully driven by consumerism. So how has this postmodern culture informed the renewing of worship practices? The fact that culture informs methods used to practice worship is absolute. Humans do what they do with what they know. So because the fall of man, this is the only world that we will ever know. Therefore, worship can only consist of things known and experienced by man. It is impossible to worship through anything outside of the context of culture, because worship is not genuine if it has no attached meaning for the worshiper. This means that worship must be continually renewed, evolving as the culture does, in order to maintain the authenticity of the worship being practiced. However, amidst the attempts to renew worship for the postmodern generation, the consumer mindset has changed the way that people view worship. The act of worship is simply bringing glory and honor to God. Stanley J. Grenz summarizes that worship means attributing worth to the one who is worthy. The narcissistic tendencies of postmodern culture have eroded away at this truth. It has been replaced with the misconception that worship exists to serve us, the worshipers. Obviously, this issue of consumerism is not present in all contemporary worship styles. There are fringe styles that I have been researching that have successfully integrated worship into a cultural context. And the first of which that I will talk about is alternative worship. So alternative worship started in the late 80s in the United Kingdom as an extension of the Church of England. And the most famous of these kind of services was referred to as the 9 o'clock service, or NOS. This new worship style was modeled after a nightclub kind of aesthetic to attract younger people who are into the nightlife. But this nightclub aesthetic featured things like electronic music and dark lighting and fancy colored dance lighting and projected art or video like on the walls. And services were held regularly on Saturdays at 9 p.m., hence the name 9 o'clock service. As far as the service format went, the services at NOS followed an altered version of the liturgy, where each worship element was cohesive with the next. These elements included meditation, prayer, and a modern, culturally adapted Eucharist. However, shortly after its conception, the NOS drifted away from any rooted theological doctrine and into a more agnostic and ecological focused practice. This was brought on by a combination of corrupt leadership and a lack of oversight from the Anglican Church. So ultimately, the church service was terminated by the Church of England due to a sex scandal in leadership. However, it is important to note, as author and theologian Brian Spinks has, that the worthiness of the minister does not affect the validity and efficiency of the worship. So this statement can be supported with scripture in Romans 9:16 through 18, which says, "So then, it depends not on human will or exertion, but on God who has mercy. For the scripture says to Pharaoh, "For this very purpose I have raised you up, that I might show my power in you, and that my name might be proclaimed in all the earth." So then he has mercy on whoever he wills, and he hardens whomever he wills. This passage is essentially saying that God can and will do whatever he wants, whenever he wants. That being said, although the expansion of alt worship to the United States was stunted by the failure of the 9 o'clock service, it has found a supporting community in England. So still operating in the Church of England, one of the most prominent churches is called Grace Church, which is based in Ealing, London. Based on their mission for authentic and accessible worship, Grace is self-proclaimed as an alternative worship community and network. Their format is aesthetically and visually driven, using environmental art, music, and projection, and therefore rely heavily on technology to facilitate these experimental worship events. Grace services are similar to that of NOS and have a continuous flow using elements like background music and activity stations and videos that will support the main theme of that monthly service. Grace has been creating monthly worship services and experiences since 1993, most of which have been well documented on their website, which is freshworship.org, which has been a very helpful resource to me. This worship style is particularly exciting for me because it lacks the routine of musical worship offering and then followed by a sermon that has become the norm in most American churches. The other more interesting worship style that I have researched is emerging worship, which is more of like a living room kind of style worship. It's very intimate, and it's done in the round, and it's very casual and conversational and relational. And that is the whole basis for the church, for the emerging church. And nothing about it is very orthodox. They practice in various building styles or building types, and they have a diverse range of musical worship, which is mostly fueled by original music and things of that nature. The last example that I would like to present is the seeker style service. On the opposite end of the spectrum, as opposed to the two previous examples that I gave, seeker churches are solely based for the sake of evangelism. And as these evangelists, in their mission as evangelists, they have grown into more of like a mega church style. So most seeker churches are mega churches. A very good example of this is Willow Creek Community Church, which is just 20 minutes away from here. They're a huge church that has really overly focused on evangelism, which their service style seeks to appeal to the unchurched in that they have a more of like a concert style of worship that is designed for people to receive and consume. But this seeker style is actually very vulnerable to worship error. The posture of worship in the seeker church is one of receiving, like I said. And their main focus is actually evangelism over growth. So of course, evangelism is important in faith, but seeker churches can tend to value evangelism more than the continued growth in our relationship, in our walk with Christ. And I kind of liken it to the parable of the sower. And churches like Willow Creek are just overzealous sowers of the seeds of the gospel, and rather than being farmers and tending to those seeds. So the Great Commission calls us to go forth and make disciples, and this overzealous sowing of seeds begs the question whether or not seeker churches are actually going out and making disciples rather than just believers. So people who attend seeker churches are not any less saved because these churches are more culturally informed, but it is important to note that their faith is not growing, it's static. Corporate worship can be spirit-filling, but that is not the main purpose of corporate worship. It is to glorify God and to bring Him honor. So next Sunday, on Easter, evaluate your heart. The heart of the worshiper is the error here, not culture. Oh, it's alternative worship. It's not very widely known in the U.S. Because of, I think it mostly is due to the fact that there was this huge and epic failure in the 9 o'clock service epidemic.
Stephanie, you made the point that even if the pastoral staff is not as they should be, that God can still use them, which is true. But what do you do then with Paul's admonition to Timothy to walk worthy and not let them judge you because you're young? You need to stand solid for God. That seems to be a counter-argument to what you're saying about, yeah, well, God can use anybody. How would you respond to that?
Can you restate the question?
All right, what was it you were saying about the leadership of the alternative worship? What was the problem with that leadership?
There was like a lot of issues there. There was just not a lot of guidance from the Church of England. They became too removed from their home church.
So the
leadership kind of quickly rose through the ranks, I guess, more quickly than it should have. And so people who were not properly equipped to lead were put in that leadership position.
Was your point then that that was okay, God could still use them?
No, my point was that despite that, there were instances of people coming to faith in Christ through that unhealthy environment.
And that was okay because he used Pharaoh too? Was that your point? Or did I misunderstand? Yeah, what? I misunderstood it? Or yes, you said Pharaoh?
Yes, I said Pharaoh.
Okay, so my question then is, the Apostle Paul said to Timothy, walk worthy of the gospel. Don't act in a way that would bring disdain on God. So shouldn't that admonition have stood for those leaders of the alternative worship as well?
Yes, I think it does. But I was really focusing more on the past tense of the event rather than what could have happened and what should have been happening.
Okay, my impression was you were saying it wasn't that bad because God used Pharaoh, which doesn't excuse what Pharaoh did.
No, I was not dismissing that at all.
And to be fair, it was one person in church.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
Unfortunately,
Yeah, it was just like the one
clouded
person.
a whole movement.
Yeah,
because
the whole
critics
service was
focused
resting
on that.
on one person as opposed to a group of elders. Yeah.
All right, we have time for one more question because that went longer than the allotted time. Anybody else? If you could go to any one of these types of services, which one would you choose?
I feel like going to the emerging church service would be more convenient because they do exist in America. As far as I know, and as I've seen like in my research, the alternative worship has not really had a lot of action over here in America. But if I could, I would love to attend one of these services, because a lot of the people who do attend these services actually do it as like a supplemental worship environment and worship community to like a regular every Sunday service that they would normally go to. And I just think that that's really fascinating, worship services that are like supplemental.
Good, thank you. All right, audience, we know we're past time. Thank you for coming.